I'd like to share an idea with you which I hope you think is worth pursuing. It's all about the humanness of a human being in contrast to the concept and utility implied by the phrase human resource. Do you have a dream for yourself as a human being? And is that dream driving you to become all that you can be, all that you're destined to be, or indeed aspire to? And if you had a purpose in life, what would that purpose be for you? I'm going to make an assumption. Everybody sitting here in the audience is a human being. Is that fair? Now, if you are a human being, the chances are you had parents. They were also human beings. Chances are you had grandparents. Perhaps you had siblings, perhaps uncles, aunts, cousins. And through your life's journey in your childhood, you've had friends. What that is saying is we are destined. Forget it. No choice. We're predestined to live in a relational world. And truly, the only way to change that is by having a care for every single human being you meet in the world, whether it's at work, your rest, or at play. A 19th century writer once said, "We are so acutely aware of our own struggles. We're preoccupied with our own problems. And of course, we sympathize with ourselves because we see only too clearly all our issues." And then he said something very wise. "Let us be kind to everyone we meet, for nearly everyone is fighting a hard battle." Now, in order to sustain that relational world, we have to do something. Right? Have a vocation, a profession, a career, maybe start a business, or maybe just get a job. Although I'm not so convinced jobs exist anymore. We have to exchange our value as human beings for an income in order to sustain our relational world. I'd like to share with you some connections I make about being human, leadership, a beggar called Muschini. That Swahili phrase, Hakuna Matata, and a man called Rock. Leadership for me is not something you can buy or read about. Leadership comes about when a human being goes within and transcends his or herself and reaches those depths, those heights of the essence of what it is to be human. And at that level, one is close to the sheer potentiality of what a human being can do and be. From that level, a human being exudes a magnanimity, a vibration from one human being to another and beyond. And it is that energy, that sheer gesture of camaraderie with another human being that causes a welling up in another of inspiration and motivation to do something. When I was a young boy growing up on the island of Mombasa in Kenya, on the east coast of Africa, my mentor, I called him Uncle Kaslingo. He was a community elder, a family friend. He used to talk to me about the greatness of a human being. He would say, any human being you meet is more than just what you see with your eyes. He introduced me to the topic of philosophy, and from that I learned about ageless and ancient wisdom traditions. And from the dawn of time, man had this hunger, this urge to learn more, to be more, to search, to go, to be adventurous. From the earliest of times, man, as human being, was trying to understand, what is it to be human? What is it to be a human being amongst human beings? And what is it to be human in this whole environment of all other living things on the planet? He talked to me about the greatness of humankind. And I learned about great masters, great teachers, and great leaders. All of this helped influence my own philosophical outlook on life and helped influence the dreams I have for myself as a human being. At about the same time, my grandpa used to take me for walks into the town. And Grandpa showed me how to not only recognize myself as a human being, but to see a human being in every single one of you. In everyone I met as a human being. And during those walks, Grandpa would always stop and talk to one particular person. And this person was a beggar. We called him Muschini. And this beggar was a victim of polio from birth and would never have the use of his legs for the rest of his life. Now, such was the societal conditioning of the time. If you were born a beggar and crippled and handicapped, that's it, that's your lot, that's how you're destined for life. But not Grandpa. All Grandpa could see was a human being. And every day he would meet Muschini, he would talk and discuss and ask questions of Muschini so that Muschini could see himself, raise his own awareness that he was a human being first and not just a crippled body. And through those discussions, Grandpa helped Muschini become a small businessman by selling newspapers. Because he knew Muschini couldn't just depend on the goodwill of people passing by. Right? And because he was a beggar, no income, he wasn't able to go to school. Right? In those days, education was not free. And so Grandpa used the newspapers to help Muschini read and write and talk about subjects he wouldn't normally get to understand. And Grandpa would approach him every morning and say, "Oh, good morning, Muschini. What's the news for today?" And Muschini would recite the headlines from the newspaper. And he wasn't allowed to look at the newspaper, he had to memorize them, knew what they meant. And then Grandpa would give him some money for about 4 or 5 newspapers, but not take any newspapers, just to help him with the cash. Now Muschini lived in a tribal village about 4 or 5 hours away. That's how long it would take him to commute. And there was no way he could do that twice a day. So he decided to sleep off on the streets. And for shelter, he had cardboard boxes. And when Grandpa found that out, he had a word with a shopkeeper who was a friend and asked if Muschini could sleep in the shop front for 3-4 nights a week on the condition that he kept it clean. Okay. But Grandpa was always concerned, well, what is Muschini going to do after he sells newspapers, as he grows up? And he asked Muschini that one day. And Muschini quite calmly said, Hakuna Matata. Now, in Australia, Hakuna Matata has come to mean no worries, mate. In Britain, it's no problems, slip up a lip. In the US, it's no issues. Hakuna Matata is all of that and more. Hakuna Matata is a beautiful Swahili phrase with a philosophy. Hakuna, there is no. Matata, troubling. And what the philosophy says there is no matter what the circumstances, the Matata, you have to remove yourself to a place where you can calm down and still look at the Matata but now see it differently. And then you can do something about it. So Muschini said to Grandpa, I would like to start a business cleaning shop fronts along Kilindini Road. Buona Muse, Buona, Mr., Sir, Muse, Elder, Wise Man. Quite an accolade for someone to greet somebody else by. Buona Muse, would you help me talk to the other shopkeepers? Grandpa said no. For years I've been walking with Grandpa and he cared about Muschini. He's saying no. Just at that time the shopkeeper came to greet Grandpa. And Grandpa, without missing a beat, he said, "Oh, good morning, Abraham. Have you heard about Muschini's new business idea?" And we all three looked at Muschini. Muschini said, "Buona, I have been cleaning your shop front for a while now. And when I look at the other shops on Kilindini Road, ours is the best. I think I could start a business cleaning the others. Buona, will you help me talk to the other shopkeepers?" The shopkeeper said, "No." "Oh, I was 10, 11 years old then, and I was getting traumatized. Grandpa could sense this, and he put his hand on my shoulder. And the shopkeeper said, Muschini, I'll tell you what I'll do. You really have been keeping the shop front very clean. We've only got to see the other shops. And besides, when you sleep here 3 or 4 nights a week, I actually take comfort from that additional security you give me. I will write you a letter of reference, and you can take it to the shops and see if they'll give you an opportunity. That same day, Muschini went to 20 different shops, and all 20 said that they would give him a trial for 1 month. Well, within that year, Muschini not only retained those 20 shops, he had another 50. He was clean. Only this time, he was employing people. And he was employing the mentally and physically handicapped. Nobody asked him to do that. He just did that from the magnanimity of his own human being. Those that could stand up, he made them dust the cobwebs and wash the windows. And the others would clean the floor in front of the shop entrance, and now also the pavement between the shop and the road. A couple of years later, Muschini invited Grandpa to his village, and Grandpa took me along. I'll never forget, it was quite an interesting trip. It took us 5 hours. We went by multiple minibuses, they call them Matatus. You wouldn't get licensed in a Western world. And the last bit was a walk through the forest, through a track, until we came to the clearing where Muschini's village was. When we got there, well, Muschini introduced us to his bibi, his wife. He was married. And he introduced us to his 3 totos. He had 3 children. And they were living in a house that they built themselves with mud brick and thatch roof. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a life transformed. And the life was transformed because of the magnanimity of one human being who cared for another. Some years later, I moved continents, went to live in Europe, and then came to live in Australia, and I started life in Perth, Western Australia. And there I met a man called Rock, R-O-Q-U-E. By absolute coincidence, Rock also lived growing up in Mombasa, but I didn't know him then, and he was old enough to be my father. But we struck a very good friendship, a very good rapport. Maybe it was our common interest in DIY projects, or if something was broken, we'd have a go. We'd try and fix it. We didn't know what we were doing. Sometimes we were successful, sometimes not. But Rock liked the way I asked questions. I was not afraid to explore. I was not afraid to say, I don't know. Let's go and find out. And one day, after I'd moved from Perth to Melbourne, Rock phoned me. And he said, Joseph, my garage door doesn't lock anymore. Can you help me? Rock's in Perth, I'm in Melbourne, we're on the phone. What was my answer? Hakuna Matata. Right? And so I started to ask questions. Are the hinges still intact? Is the wood rotted away? Has someone bumped into the garage? Right? Periodically, Rock would say, oh, that's a good question, I didn't check. Hold on a moment, and we put the phone down, run outside the house to the external garage, check, come back and give me the answer. And he did that a couple of times. And during those downtimes, whilst I was waiting for him, I just happened to write his name, like as though I was going to create a mind map. R-O-Q-U-E. And as soon as I'd done that, I had a flash of inspiration, an aha moment. And I saw Grandpa's wisdom of asking questions in Rock's name. You see, Grandpa would always say in any situation, in any Matata, now what's really going on here? You know, calm down, what's really going on here? So R stood for reality now. And then Grandpa would say, you know, there's always something you can do. Always. You just look in front of you, open your eyes, look in front of you. And when you've done that, look on the sides. And when you've done that, look behind you. And if you can't look behind you, get somebody to help you. And there's a little tip there from ancient wisdom tradition that says the first step into solving a problem is to accept that you've got a problem. Most of us, when faced with an issue, not my fault, her fault, his fault, you know. Not my choice to do it, I was asked to do this by my boss or whatever. Right? But with wisdom tradition, what it says is when you accept ownership, a humility sets in. And you're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to say, I don't know, I need help. So O stood for options. Now, when you've got all these options in front of you, you have to make a choice, you have to make a decision. I was inspired by the letter Q in Rock's name and the word quest. Quest for me is about the congruence of the head and the heart. You know, sometimes when you have rationally looked at something and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do, but your heart's not in it, the chances of you achieving fulfilling success are limited. And by the same time, if you're passionately enamored by what it is you've got to do, but you haven't thought it through, you might miss a trick or two. So really, quest is all about the congruence of head and heart, not necessarily balance, but congruence. And it's very interesting, right now, absolute current scientific research on the brain function and how the brain system works and how the heart's nervous system works are bringing science together. And they're beginning to realize that there's a correlation between how the heart functions and how the brain functions. Now, you know, in ancient wisdom tradition, thousands of years ago, they didn't have access to the scientific technology we have today, but they talked about having the congruence of head and heart. Now, Grandpa would then say, okay, now that you've decided to do that, what do you need? What do you need? Not what somebody else tells you. And again, I was inspired by the letter U in Rock's name. For what do you uniquely need for this particular quest before you get started? And then, of course, Grandpa was very good and very strict with his discipline. So what exactly are you going to do? So E stood for execution. What exactly are you going to do, by when, how much, how big, and how are you going to hold yourself accountable and to whom? Right? So there, ROC, the acronym, became a bit of a coaching tool. It's also a bit of a self-discovery tool. We can use it on ourselves and with others. And that acronym has now evolved to become the ROC model. And we ask people, individuals, what is the reality for your dream, for yourself as a human being right now? What's working? What's not working? Are you going where you were planning to go? What's the reality of your dream for yourself in your relational world, your key relationships? And what is the reality for yourself in your professional or career aspirations? Are you still doing the things you wanted to do? And then you go through the process. What options do you have? And then what are you going to choose to do? What is your quest going to be from here on in? And what do you need to put in place before you start that quest? And then, of course, you go out and achieve it. I have some questions for you. Who is that Uncle Castellino, mentor-like figure in your life who awakens you to see the greatness of humankind? Who is the grandpa-like figure in your life that shows you that you are a human being and so is everyone else that you meet? And have you met the Muschini that lives within you? Where no matter what the circumstance or the Matata, from there you look at the same thing but now see it differently. And where is your leadership? Where is your leader? Is he or she within or out there? Would you be willing to take Rock in as a friend to help yourself and help others? I have a saying that people often quote back at me now. There is no such thing as business, company, organization, or corporation. Now, It's only human beings having meaningful conversations with other human beings. Even widgets, even products, solutions and services are created as a result of meaningful conversations between human beings. You know, good and great managers and leaders do not default to the behavior of treating everybody that works for them as widgets or resources. Every single individual with whom one has a conversation is a fellow human being. We should not allow ourselves to be robbed of being human just because of the matata that happens in life. Not just in the workplace, home as well. We should look for that something special even when we meet a stranger who is a human being. And respect it, treasure it. We should learn to care for every fellow human being that we meet, whose path we cross. Just having a care, that mindset of care, shifts your paradigm and gives you a completely new experience in your conversation. What is that doing for yourself as a human being? When you begin to build that, use that as your compass to navigate through life and be true to yourself. From one human being to every single one of you as human beings. Asante sana. In Swahili, that means thank you very much. Thank you for letting me share this time and this space with you today.